Hi, welcome to this week's With Liberty and Justice for Some. I'm Congressman Mark Pocan, the organization that really keeps members of Congress in check, as well as executive branch, as well as the legislative branch, the Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington. Donald, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
So my question for you is, if you had the ability, without having to go through Congress or any other normal path, just to get something done, one thing, either a law change or a policy change, and it's the top thing that you think would be helpful to do, what would that one thing be, and why would you make that change?
Ending Citizens United. I think whether it is who gets elected to office and how, expanding the ability for regular folks to pursue and secure public office, which I think changes the ethics dynamics on things like stock trading, and the policy making that is done on the Hill, and the lobbying that is done to the executive branch. I think reversing Citizens United and allowing for more limitations on spending in our politics would really unlock the keys to government working better for regular folks, which I think would lead to a more responsive and productive democracy. And so, so many of our problems right now are because not just people don't have faith in our democracy, but people, have every reason to lack faith in our democracy because influence seekers have too much power over who gets elected and the policies that become law and the policies that don't become law despite widespread bipartisan support.
Yeah. I think that might be our number one answer we get from folks, which hopefully speaks volumes that so many people from so many different backgrounds are looking at that.
I'm happy to be part of the chorus.
Well, thank you, Donald. Thanks so much for being with us today. As everyone talks about affordability, absolutely people are paying too much for groceries and everyday goods because of the irregular use of tariffs. We're paying more for healthcare and utilities because of the so-called big beautiful bill. We're paying more for gas because of an illegal war in Iran. But just as important as paying too much for things is not making enough money. And we have not changed the minimum wage in this country for way, way too long. But one thing that doesn't get attention, in addition, is the sub-minimum wage. And I was a small business owner for 37 years. This never really made sense to me. I hope in the next half hour I'll understand why we had it, why we should get rid of it, why we need to raise the wage, and to really understand how some of the people who are the lowest paid workers are the folks that are hurt the most by all of this. And this hurts us really as a country. And my guest today is someone who I have always admired for the work she's done since day one I got here, an outstanding national advocate for raising the minimum wage, but specifically the tipped minimum wage. She's the president of One Fair Wage and the director of the Food Labor Research Center at the University of California, Berkeley, and you co-founded the Restaurant Opportunities Center. One Fair Wage is a national campaign to get rid of all sub-minimum wages in the United States. It is my honor to have as my guest today, Saru Jayaraman. Saru, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for your leadership, Representative.
Yeah, well, and you've written some books too, right?
Yes, about 5.
5?
Yes.
Is it one like Forked or something
Yes,
like that?
Forked,
I have that one
New
at home.
Standard for American Dining, Behind the Kitchen Door.
Yep.
I did a couple edited volumes, and then most recently one called One Fair Wage, Ending Sub-Minimum Pay in America. I have another book coming out on Labor Day, which I'd love to talk about, called What Has Democracy Done for You Lately?
Yeah, let's make sure we get to that.
Okay.
Let's start with, what is One Fair Wage?
So we're a national organization of restaurant workers. We represent the 13.6 million people who work in food service across the country. Mm-hmm. It is the largest employer of women, people of color, immigrants, youth, and yet it is the absolute lowest paying, and it has been for generations, dating all the way back to emancipation when the wage structure was created.
So what is the national minimum wage and sub-minimum wage right now?
Yeah, so right now, federal minimum wage is an absurd and ridiculous $7.25 an hour. The sub-minimum wage for tipped workers is an even more outrageous $2.13. Now, I do just want to step back and say, what is the federal minimum wage?
Yeah.
Because when FDR first introduced the idea of a federal minimum wage in 1938 as part of the New Deal, he said this is the lowest wage anybody in the country who works should get to meet the cost of living. And we are now at a point where the wage is $7.25, $2 for tipped workers, $2.13, and the least you need anywhere in the United States, according to the MIT Living Wage Calculator, is $25 an hour. Wow. So you're talking about a federal minimum wage that is less than a third of what you need the least you need to meet the cost of living anywhere in the U.S., even in the cheapest county, in McLennan County, Texas, is the cheapest county in the U.S. You need $25 an hour if you have a dependent.
Wow. So that's like, for the full minimum wage, about $14,000, $15,000 a year.
Yeah.
Which is
Nobody
ridiculous,
can live on.
right?
Yes, yeah.
But $2.13.
Oh, it's absurd. Yes.
So how did we wind up with a sub-minimum wage when I would argue that wasn't enough to live
Never.
on at
Yes,
any point?
that's right. So actually, in the 1800s, waiters in the U.S. were white men, and they got a full wage. There was no sub-minimum wage. They went on strike in 1853 for a higher wage. One of the first coordinated strikes in U.S. history.
Okay.
And the restaurant industry immediately started looking for cheaper labor. And at first that was white women. They thought they could pay them a lot less. But 10 years later, emancipation happened. And so in 1865, the restaurant industry hit upon what they thought was a great idea. Hire newly freed black women, tell them you're not going to get any wage at all. You're going to live on this new thing that's come from Europe called a tip. Now, in Europe, for generations since feudal times, tips had been an extra or bonus on top of a wage that kings and earls and dukes would give to their servants on top of a wage or a salary. So workers in feudal times got a full minimum wage, and gratuity or tip was on top of that. But when the idea came to the States, the restaurant industry used it basically as a way to continue to access free black labor after slavery ended. And so they were set up this system of telling these black workers, no wage, you're going to live on customer tips. And we went from $0 in 1865. That became the law in 1938 as part of the New Deal. When FDR established that federal minimum wage, these workers were left out based on lobbying from the National Restaurant Association, which was established in 1919 for this very purpose. And we went from 0 in 1938 to $2.13 an hour. And look, you can ask yourself, how is it that you've got such a huge population of workers whose wages have only gone up $2 over, 150 years? On the one hand, I would say it is the money, power, and influence of this ugly trade lobby, the National Restaurant Association. We call it the other NRA. Today is led by the chains, the IHOPs, the Denny's, the Applebee's, billion-dollar corporations. And on the other side, who do you have? You have women. You have the largest employer of women in the country. They are the poorest women in the United States. They are largely single moms working as waitresses. They are often young women. They have the highest rates of both economic instability and sexual harassment of any industry. And so this is yet another example, Congressmember, of the devaluation of women and women's work.
Yeah. But it's even not just, I shouldn't say, it sounds wrong to say it that way, but it's not just wait staff, it's other,
Yes,
a lot of
absolutely.
other professions,
That's right. Well,
What
even within the restaurant industry, it's not just wait staff.
Yeah.
It's bussers, runners, delivery workers, all get a sub-minimum wage. And then that's 75% of tipped workers, but you've got parking attendants and nail salons and car wash workers and wheelchair attendants in airports. They all get a sub-minimum wage in most states.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never understood this. I was a small business owner for 37 years, and I would direct my employees to do something, but they had a wage, but I could hire and fire at that level. When you have a sub-minimum wage, you're implying that someone else is really
That's
the
right.
greater payer of the
That's
person,
right.
but they have to follow essentially every direction of that employer for
That's
that
right.
sub-minimum wage.
That's right. The worst part of it is the employer is profiting off the value of that worker's labor, but not paying for it. Somebody else is paid for it. They've set up a system where they have one group of working people paying for another group of working people's wages without the employer who's profiting ever having to pay.
Yeah.
And what that does is create such incredible vulnerability among the workers because they never know, look, tips go up and down, day to day, shift to shift, week to month, month to month. With climate chaos, forget it. Tips are erratic. And post-pandemic, there's general tip fatigue and tips have been going down. But your bills don't go up and down. Your rent doesn't go up and down. It only goes up.
Right, right.
And so tips are not enough to live on. Everybody needs a wage from their employer, like every other worker in every other industry. Let the tips be on top of that, as they are in multiple states already.
So what was the argument that they made to have a subminimum? Because again, you're directed, it's no different than working in a retail business where you've got a different, right now, very low minimum wage.
That's right.
But what was the argument that made these industries different?
Since 1919, it's really the National Restaurant Association that's driven this. And since 1919, honestly, it's been the same argument they made at emancipation. You try to make us pay these workers, we'll go out of business. If we have to pay for their labor, we'll go out of business. And it's we have the lowest profit margins. We are the greatest sufferers of any business. And it's not fair to you and other small businesses that have to pay the minimum wage. That IHOP and Denny's, multi-billion-dollar corporations, get away with paying $2, or in Wisconsin, $3. You know, it's just not fair.
You know, it's funny when people talk about, well, no one makes a minimum wage anyway.
They do. Tipped workers do.
Tipped workers, absolutely, but so do other. So in my
Retail
business,
workers, yeah.
I called a warehouse about a year and a half ago, and I still had the business in Texas, and they were having a hard time getting employees. Well, finally had the person on the phone. I said, well, what do you pay your warehouse workers? It was the minimum wage.
Wow.
Well,
Wow.
Of course you're not going to have employees.
Exactly.
Right?
Nobody wants to work for that anymore.
But they were actually taking advantage of people at that level. And so...
but I got to tell you, nobody works one job for the minimum wage anymore.
Right.
If you get 7 or 8 or 10 or even 15, you are working 2 and 3 jobs.
Yeah.
And that is the reality, I would say, of half of working Americans right now. You know, when we were leading the fight for 15, we were talking about maybe 15 or 20% of the population that was less than $15.
Yeah.
Now we're talking about actually a minimum wage that would meet the cost of living, the bare minimum to meet the cost of living. That's 50% of workers in the United States that earn less than $25 an hour. 50%.
Yeah.
That includes everybody of all political stripes, of all occupations. Everybody's struggling right now.
And I'm guessing there's a correlation to not having other benefits like healthcare as
Oh,
well.
of course
in
not.
those-
Who has that?
Right.
That's a rare occurrence.
Yeah. No, especially in those industries. I was in Iceland a year ago, August, and we got talking to some folks, and I found out the lowest paid industry there was the hotel workers, essentially. But when I found out what their minimum wage was,
Like 21.
well, it was about equivalent to about $80,000 a year U.S.
Wow.
Was actually the minimum.
Wow.
I know.
Wow.
So you're like, oh, that's so different than
Yes.
what we have here, and but we have places that have states in municipalities that have laws that require a different wage,
That's right.
a real wage,
That's right.
and yet they have restaurants.
That's right. So
I'm
7
confused.
restaurants have done this for decades. California, Oregon, Washington, Nevada, Minnesota, Montana, and Alaska require a full minimum wage with tips on top. California's most of these states never had a sub-minimum wage. So they've been doing it for decades. And California has the highest small business restaurant growth rate of any state in the United States. It has the highest overall restaurant industry job growth of any state in the United States. And you don't have to take it from me. Actually, in 2021, when you all voted to pass the Raise the Wage Act, do you remember that? And the Restaurant Association was saying, we can't do this, we'll go out of business if we have to pay more than $2.13. In that same moment, Newsweek actually it was David Sirota, they caught the CFO of Denny's telling shareholders on an analyst call, it's going to be okay, because in California, we pay $16.50, the full minimum wage with tips on top, and Denny's California outperforms the system. Denny's California grows faster than Denny's anywhere else. And when asked why, the CFO said, well, it's because our workers can afford to bring their families to eat at Denny's.
Yeah.
So guess what? The states that pay a full wage with tips on top and higher wages, workers have enough to eat out, enough to consume. And that's why small business grows faster. That's why business grows faster in those states.
Mark DeSaulnier from California used to be a restaurateur, and I went out there one time to his district. We went to a restaurant, and we asked the owner about their policy, and he was very clear that it worked well, that his employees are making a better wage, and that, like you said, their families can also go to the restaurant and all the rest.
That's right.
So if it works well, then why is the NRA still doing
Well,
this?
it's so funny because
The National Restaurant
Yes,
Association.
not the
NRA.
Rifle
Right,
Association.
yes. Make sure I get that out there.
It's so funny because after the CFO of Denny's said this, he said, oh, we'll be fine. Denny's California outperforms the system. The following week, there was a second headline in Newsweek, Denny's shareholders revolt, because all these shareholders got together and said, wait a second, if you're saying that paying people more makes the company grow faster, you are actually going against shareholder interests by fighting this.
Yeah.
And they had no response. And the truth is, what they do is they look at only quarterly returns. If you look at quarterly returns, if you pay people more, it's going to look like in that quarter, you lost money.
Yeah.
But if you look at even 3 months more, you're going to see the incredible benefits that come from paying people more. You grow. You have more retention. Everybody knows workers stay longer and are more loyal and do a better job if they're paid enough. Yeah. And right now, when most of the people I know, including myself, are working 2 and 3 jobs, that's how you survive in this economy. Imagine if you could have one job, focus on that one job, develop it as your craft, as your profession, have time to spend your family. Imagine how much better we all would be at our one job if we had 1 instead of 3.
And it's not just because it's the right thing to do, but also it sounds like it's a good business thing to do.
It's a really good business.
Yeah.
It's less turnover, higher morale, less employee theft. There's so much data.
Did you say Montana in that mix?
Yes.
Explain how that happened.
Well, you know, Alaska's in that mix.
Yeah.
These states are independent thinkers.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, this doesn't make any sense, just like you said. It doesn't make any sense to have this one industry get this one exception when all other businesses, how is it fair to all the other small businesses that they have to pay the minimum wage and this one industry gets away with it?
Well, the thing, I mean, again, for me was just, you direct your employee because you're
right.
paying them a wage.
That's
and
right.
A restaurant is no different. It's not like other than me saying, can I please get a glass of water? I'm not directing you to do all the other procedures that come out of a restaurant.
That's
and,
right.
But all those other professions you mentioned too, I mean, what percent is that of that wage?
That's only 25%.
Okay, about
really,
25%.
for the most part, the restaurant industry is driving this. The National Restaurant Association is driving this. And what you're seeing is other industries trying to emulate it so that they too can have the benefit of a sub-minimum wage. So my argument is, as long as you leave the restaurant industry with a sub-minimum wage, more and more industries are going to want to do it.
Well, I think you said delivery drivers and Uber. Talk about that, the gig economy
Yeah, well,
jobs.
back in the day, before Uber and Lyft were around, delivery workers worked for restaurants and they were paid a sub-minimum wage and they had to get tips from the people. Now,
and they're using their own vehicle and
that's
gasoline
right.
and everything else
usually
already.
it was bikes back in the day. But now with Uber Eats and Grubhub and all of these horrible companies that frankly are charging the small business restaurants way too much money, it's frankly incredibly opaque. We don't even know what these workers, they don't know what they make. They don't know how much the company's taking. Nobody knows. And so it's even worse. It's even worse.
Are they treated as independent contractors in that?
They are treated as independent contractors.
That on top
they used
of
to
it.
be employees of the restaurant.
Right.
And now they're independent contractors.
So they're having to put aside their own taxes and everything else. And,
That's right.
Oh my.
And you know, it's funny, you were saying, why does this one industry, the other argument the Restaurant Association has made is that these workers, these servers, they're like independent contractors. They're out there working for their tips and they just use our restaurant, which is ridiculous because they're all supposed to, follow the same menu, wear a uniform that the employer provides, show up at a certain time. They are definitely not independent contractors. They work for a boss and that boss should pay them like every other boss.
Yeah, I think sometimes I like being a small business owner here because I've been through some of the practical side of this where we had the small business SBA administrator in Kelly Loeffler who I think her and her husband are worth about $800 million.
Oh.
And when you try to talk to they said they talk to businesses. Well, yeah, you're talking to a bunch of other people who belong to your country club or who give Donald Trump money and belong to Mar-a-Lago. Talk to a small business and figure it out. And I was even a union business because I thought that was important. But I was fortunate because I kept my employees longer. You know how much it costs, as you know, training people and go through all that? There's so many advantages to a business doing this.
Longevity. Yeah. But I do want to, because you brought up Donald Trump.
Yes, please, yeah.
I do want to say that I feel like what he did in the 2024 election with no tax on tips blew this this issue up, and made people really understand, look, our members, restaurant workers, when they heard that, they said, that's ridiculous. 2/3 of tipped workers don't even earn enough to pay federal income tax. So they said, we know he's pandering. But they said, Saru, at least he thinks we're important enough to pander to. The other side doesn't even think we're important to include every time the minimum wage goes up.
Wow.
So it's generally
Yeah,
Democrats who lead minimum wage increases, and it's always Democrats who lead that
behind.
compromise for tipped workers. And so when they saw him call them out for the first time during that it was the first time tipped workers were mentioned in a presidential campaign. And so we went to Kamala, we went to the Democrats, we said, please, respond, run on raising wages and that you're going to include tipped workers. And there was just no, it was a no. And so I think let this be a lesson that you leave these workers out, huge populations of workers out at your peril.
Right.
Because then they become open to co-optation by the right. If we don't think they're important enough to include, to think that they too deserve a livelihood that allows them to thrive, and only the voices of restaurant owners are important over workers, we lose them.
So just, I repeat that, was it 2/3 of the tip workers don't pay a federal income because they make so little anyway?
They make so little, yes. I mean, when you earn $2 or $3, your wage is so low it goes to taxes. You earn completely, you live off your tips. You don't pay taxes at the end of the year. That's it.
So even the benefit of that
There's
wasn't
no
there,
benefit.
but the fact it was talked about
That's right. They felt seen.
was a value.
They felt seen in a way that they often feel ignored by electeds from both parties.
And the minimum wage, the federal minimum wage, how many states are still close to that federal minimum wage? Do you know offhand?
It's about 20.
About 20, okay.
States that are mostly in the South.
Okay.
New Mexico.
I think Wisconsin, unfortunately, is one of them.
Yeah, Pennsylvania, yeah.
Yeah.
So they're not all in the South, but
Yeah.
they're largely in the South. And yeah, it's absurd and ridiculous. And I do think even in the South, even in these states, a lot of employers are having to pay more because it's so out of date.
Right.
It's so ridiculous. But raising the minimum wage lifts all boats.
Yeah.
When the wage floor goes up, people above the wage floor go up. And those people spend because that's what they need the money for, is survival.
Well, and it's just so tied to the affordability message that Democrats are talking about,
That's
and
right.
others talk about, that the fact that if you can't afford your groceries, if you make a little more money, you're a little better off.
That's right.
Fighting back on the tariffs. Otherwise, you're just squeezed.
That's right. And I'm tired of affordability only being about prices.
Yeah.
Because yes, affordable health care, absolutely. Affordable child care, absolutely. Affordable housing, everything is important. And all of that are long-term solutions which are critical that will slow down the overall pace of increase over time. They're not going to bring people where they are right now to where the cost of living is right now. And so you have to also talk about raising wages. There's no way around it.
We just went through all the inflation through COVID and everything else on top of it.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It is. We've seen the greatest year-over-year price increases in the last 6 years since the pandemic than we have ever seen in U.S. history.
And yet the wages have remained flat.
Remained exactly the same. And where has all of that differential gone? It's gone to the 1%.
Now, I'm going to forget the name of there was a bill that we passed as Democrats. Was it the Raise the
Wage Act, yes.
And what would that have done?
In 2019 and again in 2021, the House passed the Raise the Wage Act, which would have raised the minimum wage to $15 for all workers, including tipped workers, workers with disabilities, and youth who've been left out.
Okay.
Here we are, 2026, and 15, 17. These numbers are nowhere near what people need. As I said, MIT says the least you need to live is 25, and frankly, in higher cost regions, it's 27 and 30. I just came in from California.
Yeah.
We just submitted signatures for a $30 minimum wage in Oakland, Emeryville, the Bay Area. And frankly, that's less than what people need. 25 is not a living wage in the United States. 30 is not a living wage in
25
California.
is going to give you, what, 52,000, give or take, almost 52,000
And
a
that's
year.
right now. Most of these bills phase these numbers in over many years.
Talk about that, because I think that is misleading. People are like, oh my God, we're going to do such a big jump.
Yeah, no. I mean, well, first of all, I do want to say to that, one of our coalition partners, PolicyLink, was founded by Angela Glover Blackwell, and she said the most brilliant thing. She said the only people who think these numbers of 25 and 30 are too high are people who earn a lot more than that.
Yeah. You mean the half of Congress that's a millionaire?
That's right.
All right. People like that. I get you. Okay.
Half of America, 50% of America earns less than 25.
Yeah.
50%.
Right.
And totally understands that is the least they need to survive and have one job again.
Yeah.
But again, we are not talking about getting to 25 overnight. The bill that's currently moving in Congress.
And what's the name of that
It's called
bill?
the Living Wage for All Act.
Okay.
And it's part of a big national movement. There are living wage for all bills and ballot measures moving all across the country and federally. That bill gets to $25 by 2038. So you're talking about more than a decade,
Yeah.
a very slow
Yeah.
increase for most businesses to give people the time. But the point of the bill is to create hope
Yeah.
that
Right.
actually we can get closer to the cost of
What would
living.
the immediate increase be at that point?
You mean, the first year?
Yeah.
If we passed it next year, people might get $1.50, $1.75. Yeah.
That's still slow.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's the most, I mean,
Yeah.
it's way more than
Yeah,
anything we have right now.
Right, right.
You
I
know?
understand.
Yeah.
So that's called, what again, the name?
The Living Wage for All Act.
Okay.
Yeah, no exceptions.
Okay, because I know that, I think one of the confusing things, and we talked a little bit about this earlier, is, there was a bill for 15, then 17, someone had
Yes.
one at 20, and I think I heard about one in Wisconsin, someone was talking 23, and then, so I think part of our job is to let people know that the bill
The bill is the
that the
Living Wage for
movement
All Act.
is
Yes.
putting out there
Yes.
is to get to $25
That's right.
by 2038.
That's right.
What else does it do?
It gets rid of all exceptions for tipped workers, workers with disabilities, youth. It actually indexes the minimum wage so that it continues to grow.
Very important.
Yes, after it gets to $25.
Congress is so dysfunctional. You don't want to have us do this again. Make it easy the way it should be. Yes.
Yes, but we have to get back to what FDR says
Yeah.
what the minimum wage
Yeah.
is, the cost of living. And that's what people across the country are asking us to do, is to help them meet the cost of living.
Yeah. You brought up, just when you said that, something else I think people may not know, but the youth wage.
Yes.
Also people with disabilities.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about some of those exceptions that exist right now.
Have equally offensive histories to
Yeah.
the subminimum wage for tipped workers. The people with disabilities subminimum wage comes from a horrific misunderstanding or belief back in the day that people with disabilities were lesser human, were of lesser value. And the youth subminimum wage is frankly just an opportunity for employers to exploit young people,
I had one restaurant chain in my area try to tell me they actually were really good on raising minimum wage. They thought that was a good idea, I think to 15 even. But they wanted a youth subminimum wage because they were training them, was the argument.
These days, all the young people I know are supporting their families.
Yeah.
They're working multiple jobs while in college, while in school, just to support their families. So because cost of living is so crazy, it is now taking multiple income earners in a household, all working multiple jobs. It's not a way to live.
Yeah.
Beyond all the wage, and this is an issue both of well-being, mental health, and democracy. Because when you work 3 jobs, you are run ragged, you feel hopeless, you feel like there's no light at the end of the tunnel, but also you have no capacity to engage in any democratic process, whether that's voting or participating on an issue you care about. Look, you barely have time to spend with your family,
to get
let
to your
alone
kids' sporting events or whatever
let
they're going
alone
to.
participating on issues you care about. So I know I ask restaurant workers all the time, come out to a No Kings rally on Saturday to save democracy. They say, save democracy. I earn $3 and I work 3 jobs. What has democracy done for me lately? And I heard that so often, I decided to write a book, What Has Democracy Done for You Lately? To say there is no hope of us engaging working people in a fight to save democracy unless we can prove that democracy can deliver on the top issue they keep telling us over and over again is their top issue, which is the cost of living. And sometimes electeds hear that and they think, oh, they mean prices, the affordability, and it's missing paychecks. It's prices and paychecks. That is what people are talking about.
Especially in Congress where people are making
They
a
don't
good
get
substantial wage, a little more than the minimum wage, the tip minimum wage.
Yes.
For them not to understand. I don't know if you can address this or not, but the other thing that I never understood as a small business owner is the money that the way the current system works. Businesses pay for health insurance for folks. For those who offer it,
That's
for those who
right.
offer it in full-time
Very few,
jobs.
yes.
And we went out of our way to try to make it 100%. So there was no co-pay by the worker. We just kept
Amazing.
up the best we could in doing so. But if we had a national system of healthcare, we're the only industrialized nation that doesn't, that money that went to healthcare.
Could be go to wages.
Wages, new
Yeah,
equipment,
that's right.
hiring more people.
That's right.
All the things that could expand a business.
That's right. Yes, we would allow small businesses to pay a true living wage with dignified work conditions if we took healthcare off their plate, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, now that model. So tell me more about your new book, but then actually, then I want to talk about Fork, because I have that book, and which is, well, it's really what we just talked about, right?
It is.
About
Well,
the
Fork
subminimum wage.
is a
right? Yeah.
different kind of book, because all my other books were elevating the stories of workers who are struggling in the restaurant industry or other industries. Forked was elevating the voices of employers, and it was saying there are businesses that are taking what we call the low road to profitability, the IHOPs, the Denny's, the Applebee's, the Olive Gardens. And then there are all these great, mostly small and medium-sized businesses. Like I just came from Busboys and Poets here in D.C.
Andy's great. Yes.
Very good high road business, supportive of a $25 living wage for all. And these businesses say, it's not I'm not doing this out of the goodness of my heart. This is profit. This is how I make better profit, is by ensuring workers have enough to live near the jobs and spend in my business and stay in my job and only work my one job, not go running off to their second and third job.
Yeah. That's why I always said, being a union business, I support the union movement, but it also is selfish, right? If I can keep people longer because I'm paying them better.
That's right.
Often people have apprenticeship programs, then they get training, so I have more trained folks, and I'm not doing all that work because that's expensive for a small business.
That's right.
But there's so many benefits. I think that's why Fork spoke to me a little more as an employer,
Yes,
right?
yes,
So
yes, that
that's
makes
probably
sense.
why I keep bringing that one
Yes.
up. But so tell us more about the new book.
The new book is, as I said, What Has Democracy Done for You Lately? And it's really the stories of workers, not as much about their struggle on these wages, which I've said over and over again. This time it's really a lesson to the political class, to the donor class. You ignore these workers at your peril, because they are saying, honestly, F the whole system. Nothing works on either side of the aisle. No elected speaks to me because they haven't delivered for me in my whole life. I've never seen this system work for people like me. And for young people in particular are feeling particularly hopeless. And I can't tell you the number of young people who've come up to me and said, you know, having a living wage, a $30 wage, that's the only thing I've heard that gives me some hope. So it is about, it is a book, a short book about what we've not done and what we can do to engage working people in the fight to save democracy. But even that word, save democracy, it doesn't resonate with a lot of the people I talk to, because what they are experiencing right now, whatever it is, call it democracy or whatever you want to call it, they do not feel it's worth saving.
Well, they can't even participate.
They can't participate.
Right now, right?
The current status quo is not working. So the idea that we're going to preserve or save something that's not working is an anathema to them. What we have to be talking about is a bold and different future in which people can work one job and have time to spend with their family and have time to engage in a system that maybe works for them.
You know, the book I remember, it's quite old now, but Nickel and Dimed by Barbara Ehrenreich. I always thought that was...
And she worked in a restaurant in that.
In Key West or somewhere in Florida, the Keys. I'll just never forget that book. It was one of the favorite books that I had read, because she did a really great job of someone who was of privilege, but explaining what her co-workers were going through, what the conditions were like. And I just think a lot of people don't necessarily know that.
That's right. They
You
don't
know?
get it. You're right. I hadn't thought about, I'm always so frustrated why there isn't, I can't understand why is our coalition, the Living Wage for All Coalition, the only one working on wages in such an affordability crisis, right?
Right.
And I think you're right. I think it's that maybe for people in Congress who don't experience living on less than 25, what they see are higher prices, so maybe that's the focus. What they don't understand is that for most people, it's the money to pay for things that's top of mind. But also, I do have to say, partly why people shy away from it is a lack of courage. Because it takes courage to stand up to the National Restaurant Association and to employers, to your small business restaurant in your district that has probably been terrified by the National Restaurant Association. It takes courage to say to them, I will hold your hand through this. It will be okay. You know, you have to take a leap of faith with us.
Well, don't forget, we got members who are very, very wealthy here. I think half of them are millionaires. I had someone recently explaining their nanny situation they used to have, right? Like, could you imagine, like, to talk to your coalition and say, tell me about your nanny situation, right? It's like,
Oh, God.
maybe their auntie situation,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
but it's just, there is that different dynamic.
Disconnect,
and
yes.
not that you see that as much in state legislatures, but you still see the same lobbying force
Absolutely,
of the Restaurant
yes,
Association
yes.
and others.
Yes, no, and it's why our members so consistently feel like nobody represents them, nobody speaks for them, nobody on either side of the aisle is somebody they trust. And so I do think Congress members standing up for a bold new wage would restore a lot of faith in people.
Do you have any support on the other side of the aisle? Like anyone who might talk about it, right?
Actually, in New York, we have several Republicans who
Okay.
signed on to our bill to end the subminimum wage for tipped workers.
Good.
Yes,
Right.
and you know, last year the right was circulating a rumor video among MAGA voters saying that Donald Trump had already raised the federal minimum wage to $25 an hour.
I heard this somewhere, and I forget where. Yeah, I know. It's,
And so they didn't say he raised it to
I just
15
read this.
or
It was
17.
just in an article in the last week or
Yes.
so. Yeah.
And they said he raised it to 25, and the MAGA base was wild. They
Right.
said, look at Donald Trump fighting for what we really need, as opposed to those Democrats fighting for half of what we need. And so I think at this time, to overcome the misinformation and disinformation, to have a real populist agenda as opposed to a faux populist agenda, Democrats should stand, put a flag in the whatever the metaphor is. We need to stand for a true living wage for all.
Affordability has two fronts.
That's right.
Wage as well as what you pay for goods. And if
Prices and paychecks.
missing one, price, that's much better
Yes.
alliteration. Nobody used that. Prices and paychecks. Thank you.
That's right.
Anything else you want to mention for folks that we didn't get a chance to talk about in this area?
I just want to say I'm sure your listeners care about a lot of different issues, whether it's reproductive rights or, you know, any issue, name it, climate, the war. I just, you know, if half of America doesn't have enough to meet the cost of living, we need them on any of those issues, and they are not going to engage unless they have the capacity to do so.
Right.
And so if we want to win on any issue, this is a high, high priority. And my hope is Democrats take over the House and they pass this on day one.
Yeah. What's the strategy around the Senate then?
Well, I'm really proud of Senator Chris Murphy, who
Yeah.
introduced the Federal Living Wage for All Act. And surprisingly, we had some not wildly progressive senators sign on: Blumenthal, Wyden, Kim. You know, we had some.
Okay,
We have
that's
some
good.
great new support in the
Yeah,
Senate, and just an understanding that there is no path forward except to do this.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I really, like I said, I remember from one of the very first Congressional Progressive Caucus things you came and talked to us back in the day, followed this issue, but also personally as a small business owner, I never ever understood this. And hopefully listeners have a little better idea of
Thank you.
the subminimum wage, the minimum wage, and affordability is prices and paychecks.
That's absolutely right.
So
Thank
thanks
you
so much.
so much.
Yeah, thank
Appreciate
you.
you.